Hello, everybody. Welcome to, I guess this is a Sonic Talk special because we've got a very special guest in the form of Mr. Andrew Huang. How you doing, Andrew? I feel like
great.
You should be doing that thing, you know.
Like, yeah. Oh, so much movie magic has to happen to make that work. So
yeah, I can imagine.
Unfortunately, we can't today.
So how are you?
Yeah, well, how you doing? I'm good. Just in an endless loop of taking care of my little kid and making my music and videos, which is fine for now. Yeah.
That's right. Well, I suppose like all of us, you know, I mean, in a weird way, you or I probably share a similar thing, which is we spend a lot of time in a room alone. So in some ways, the pandemic has kind of not manifested itself and affected us in so many ways. I mean, it's still been a very... So I mean, the last time we saw you was Superbooth in Berlin. I forget, was that 2000?
Yeah, I want to say 2017.
So but you've been doing so much since then. I mean, there's been, you know, I got the sense then when we spoke that you were thinking of like refocusing and taking your foot off the gas a bit, not being quite such a slave to the kind of endless treadmill of doing stuff. And I suspect you've done that to a degree, but you've still been incredibly productive.
Yeah, I guess so. I definitely in 2016, a bit of 17, I think as well. Those were sort of my YouTube years. Just everything was focused around the channel, and I did 2 videos a week, almost without fail for about 18 months. I think I missed 4 or 5 in that span of time, and you know, each of them was pretty high production value. A lot of time went into them, and yeah, at a certain point after growing my channel to a good size and exploring a lot of the ideas I wanted to explore, I felt like I could slow down there and explore other things. You know, I've got the app Flip Sampler that I've put out. I've put together an online course, just other music that I've wanted to make. And then, eventually a few years after that point, I had a kid. So my daughter was born like almost a year ago at this point. And my space saga that I put together, like all these different ideas were kind of bubbling up, and yeah, it just felt like a good time. I think that ultimately I didn't feel like being just the biggest possible YouTuber was the goal that I wanted to have. And I think, yeah, my mental health has benefited from that change.
Well, I mean, you still are the sort of elephant in the room when it comes to music technology on the on YouTube. In fact, I was very disappointed. I don't know if you saw the Music Radar thing that they do, the Music Personality of the Year every year. They did another poll of that. I think you and I have both won that. And they canvass votes, and then they never published it. So I feel a little bit ripped off that we don't have a kind of...
That's right.
Yeah, it didn't come about.
I realized that, I forgot about that. They had votes this year and then no announcement.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. So, I mean, in terms of... Because people forget, or people maybe don't know, because they only know you, or maybe only know of your work that happens sort of in front of the camera. I mean, you do media composer, you do stuff behind the scenes, you do music production, you do all of these other things. I mean, how are you, because you've also had a kid, how are you managing to find the time to do this? I mean, is there are you a very strict timetable guy, or do you have to kind of go where the muse takes you?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, but I do feel like my general tendency is to just be really chaotic, and I've had to find ways to, enforce a regimen on top of that. And so, you know, I'm always getting distracted by interesting new ideas. And then at the same time, I have obligations that I've made to my clients, or to some degree, my audience as well. You know, I don't want to go for 2-3 months without putting up a video, that kind of thing. So in just trying to keep all of these things in balance, I have a huge list of the things that I'd like to be working on, the things that I'm currently supposed to be working on, and I try to, you know, set the priorities for each day of what I can manage to get done, and just bounce all around between multiple things. I think it's been ages since there's been one project for one day, you know?
I wanted to go back to one of the big project was Space Time. I mean, it's like a concept album and a concept film. I mean, it was really interesting because when you first did it, you had all the sort of messages of you sort of saying, I'm off, I'm leaving, I'm going to space. I mean, it was partly, I was thinking, what, really? What? but it was a bit of a
Yeah.
fear. But it was theatrical, right? I mean, you didn't actually go to space, right?
Yeah. So it was my attempt at probably too many things within one project, which is that I thought when I had the idea of this space-time project, which was going to be telling a story through my usual content, as well as incorporating my social media, trying to make it immersive and for a period of time, at least feel real and hopefully bring people into the story in a bit more of a fun and engaging way through its, I guess, mysteriousness. I felt like it could be a vehicle for releasing music. There was one big album at the end called Space Time that it all led up to, but at the same time I dropped a couple EPs along the way. And then it was also just something to shake up the content on my channel and have a bit more fun. And so I was trying to still do the same types of videos, like 4 producers flip the same sample or gear reviews and all this kind of stuff. But then, a space story would creep in. And and then I also just loved the idea that I could mix formats and genres. And, I always really appreciate movies and TV shows where you get kind of a twist in style, maybe one episode of a sitcom they've done as an animated thing, or I don't know, I'm thinking of a series like Donald Glover's Atlanta, where you just have like incredible shifts in mood and style at different points. And I thought, in my own slightly more cartoony way and involving some maybe sci-fi tropes, maybe I could play with that, where there's elements of comedy, there's elements of science fiction, there's like action sequences, and at the same time I'm also reviewing a guitar pedal, and I just thought there was something really fun about being that.
How did it start? Did you kind of have the concept from start to beginning, or you kind of made the framework and then introduce your other things into it? Because it sounds like it was a heck of a lot of planning, because some of that film, the set building, all of that kind of stuff was, it was a mega production, and it must have been quite a hard thing to do on the fly. So did you have to plan a lot? Did you get it all sorted out beforehand in your head, or was it as you go?
There was definitely a huge amount of planning. Funnily, the initial idea came from that period of time where I was thinking of taking a little bit of a break from YouTube. And I thought, well, I don't just want to stop making videos. Maybe there's some more interesting way that I can announce my break. And I just got more and more dramatic about it and thought, well, what if I just tell everybody I'm going to space? And then, my imagination just went with it. And I was like, no, if I do that, I have to turn that into a whole thing. So instead, I ended up taking my break as normal. And I, think I made one of those typical YouTuber gotta take a break videos. And then my team and I were, it's my wife and her brother who work with me on all different aspects of the channel, but he's a brilliant video editor. And so I knew I had his VFX skills to tap into with something like this space concept. And so we just dreamed up what this story could be that we could tell that would still incorporate what I wanted to do on my channel. And we planned out the major plot points, and there were a few specific things, of course, that we had to shoot. And there were some sets that we built actually in this room just out of wood and styrofoam. And so certain things we had to get in advance and know exactly what the story was and the dialogue. And then I left a big piece of the habitat setup in taking up a little more than half of this room here. And I would just film what I needed to. And so some of the episodes could still feel very current. I did, for instance, a review of the Microcosm guitar pedal. And that was, came out after we had started planning all this. And but because I was able to find a way to kind of join it into what we'd already been filming, it worked for our landing the ship on the other planet episode. So things like that, I felt we were able to keep things dynamic because I had part of the spaceship set up for the whole time, and other stuff was just, planned years in advance.
Wow. I mean, I know how, we're fortunate, we're both fortunate we've got studios that we've got set up, so quite often things stay in the same place and you can just kind of, switch the camera on and go, hey, I've had an idea, I've got to say something. I mean, you also post a lot. You've got 2 YouTube channels. I don't know if many people know this, but you've also got your Suture Sound, which I've got here, which is more of your kind of modular and less formal, I suppose. I guess it gives you a bit more freedom to just sort of do what you like without having to kind of stick on message, but also your social media and stuff. I mean, there's the ability to be able to do that is fantastic, but sometimes I agree, when you've got to rip it all out and change it for some reason, it's hugely disruptive, and then you've got to put it all back together again.
Yeah. And I mean, I run into that all the time, actually, because even though I have this great studio set up, I think with I kind of wonder if you go through the same thing with the amount of gear that comes in and out. You always have a little bit of shuffling and optimizing that you're doing, and maybe, things don't quite stay in one place as you want them to.
Well, I always subscribe to it's like the shop fitting set dressing, where everything from the waist up is neat and tidy. Everything from the waist down is a complete mess.
Yeah, no, that's definitely the case over here. One side of the room is just mic stands and boxes, and then over here it's a little more presentable.
Neat and tidy. So as well as this, I mean, obviously you've been developing an app as well, Flip Sampler rather. I downloaded it today. I'm sorry I didn't get around to it sooner. It's really interesting because, I think it maybe started out as a kind of fact, because you're very much into the found sound and creating. That's where a lot of your early work was kind of focused and got a lot of views and a lot of subs on YouTube. So the ability to sample into it and play, but it's essentially turned into a DAW. I mean, did it start as that concept or did it grow into something else? Because it's a very impressive piece of work.
Yeah, it started, actually, I was thinking, when I first just had the spark of the idea, I thought it would be a little hardware thing. And then I realized, one of the big reasons why I wanted to create something like this that was portable was so that I wouldn't be without it if I happened to find a sound and if I came across something that I wasn't expecting to while I was out and about. And so, of course, I realized it would be better as an app because rather than having to plan to have this device on me, I knew I'd always have my phone on me. And then, there were devices coming out like Teenage Engineering's Pocket Operator. They have a sampler one and that kind of thing. And I felt like, other people are managing in the hardware space. But I think the app allows you to do more in terms of how flexible, how powerful our phones now, that we can update them as well. And then also just the fact that it's always going to be on you. So that, for me, made it really compelling as a found sound type of sampling device. But as I connected with Oliver Greshk mainly, who has done some of the... he's done Elastic Effects and collabed with Mouse on Mars with some different iOS apps. He really helped flesh out how it could be even more than just a little sample manipulator. And, why not throw in a piano roll, have Bluetooth and MIDI and, all this kind of stuff. So it is in some ways like a DAW, but it's also, a 9-track, one sample per track kind of situation where hopefully it's a good balance between, limitations and power.
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of the UI and stuff, I mean, I'm intrigued. I mean, when you work, do you like to work faster? I mean, so often technology can be kind of a barrier. It can add friction to a process, can't it? So, I mean, were you very much focused on the way that you could just immediately do it and have it work without any of that going on?
Yeah, that was one of the big design philosophies we had, was making everything as fast as possible. And so, for me, the first thing was, a lot of times when I've recorded a sample that I want to work with, there's a little bit too much hassle to get to the point where I'm actually playing with it. If you've recorded something on your phone, you've got to send it to your DAW, or you've got to load it into a sampler, maybe truncate it, all that kind of stuff. And so we thought we could do the fastest possible, point A to point B of recording a sound and immediately having it available on pads, going through an effects chain and being able to sequence it. And it tries to detect the transient, all that kind of stuff, so that you're really just immediately upon recording already able to do all that kind of sample manipulation that you want to do. And then with the navigation as well, I think that was another spot where we did a good job of keeping it flowing really quickly, because there's just on the right-hand side, it's really quick to jump between the different pages of, drum pads or recording or live effects, mixing. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I can give a little, let me switch over to the overhead camera.
All right, so this is it running on a phone. So that's
this is an iPhone 12.
Yeah, another interesting point, because I loaded it on an iPad and it looks very similar, but that sort of stretchy UI where it still makes sense. That's a real challenge design wise, I'd imagine.
Yeah. Well, so it does work on iPhone, iPad, and iPod Touch, and right now we are a good amount of the way through developing for Android. The challenge there, though, of course, is that there are so many more devices that there's a lot more testing that needs to be done. Well, yeah, so it's got two sets of kind of functions and navigation icons on the left and right. Probably the easiest way is to just go through from top to bottom on the right side here, because we sort of organized it in a bit of a hopefully sensible way for a workflow. So this is a projects page where you can load your tracks that you're working on. Next down, this is kind of the most complicated looking page, but it's where you can record sounds as well as apply effects. So there's a number of tabs up here, and you have access to your 9 tracks of sounds. Hitting record will record over whatever you've got in there. But every recording is saved in the browser here. The other tabs here are you've got an envelope that you can apply. Let me pick a sound that makes sense to demonstrate that on. An EQ with an optional spectrum analyzer there. So 3 bands of EQ, all the common possible selectable curves there. 4 effects per channel. These are fixed, as in there's only these 4, but they can be reordered if you drag them. And I'll just
I didn't see that before. That's
turn
neat.
these on to, yeah.
I mean, when I was playing with
intense,
it, it's very quick and immediate. And I found that, because sometimes with touchscreens as well, and this is, I guess, one of the advantages of, because modern phones, especially iPhones, has become much more responsive. It feels very immediate from a kind of, end user point of view.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, that was one of our big, focuses, is that we really wanted everything about it to be immediate. So, it's pretty responsive and fun. Just continuing on this page, there's a setting for monophonic or polyphonic playback, and I think the polyphonic limit is pretty high. It's like 96 or something like that. It's like the kind of thing where you'll never run out if you want to play a ton of notes. The sample can be reversed, and let's have a look at it here. Yeah, there we go. You can set the root pitch of the sample if you want to do that independently of just using the pitch shift control. If you happen to know what pitch it is and want that to line up with your piano roll settings, there's an extra gain there. So that's kind of the samples page, we call it. And if you go down one here, this is just for have we got a... There it is. This is, just your finger drumming page. The sequencer is basically a full piano roll. It's limited to 16 bars per pattern. We found that, we wanted to give people enough room to work, but also the further you go on a little phone like this, the harder it gets to navigate. So 16 bars per pattern is where it's at, and you can actually set the loop brace to any 16th note value. So you can get into weird rhythms, polymeters. Oh, sorry, I'm not grabbing the end of it there.
Yeah, I found what I was doing was making a hi-hat part and then with some randomization in it and have it looping over 6 or 5 against a 4/4.
Yeah, and that's one of the fun things about Flip, is that every channel, every track can have its own loop length, but also if you go into the automations, you can automate a ton of different parameters: the volume, pitch, reverse on and off, sample start point, and then all the parameters of the envelope and the effects. Every single automation lane can also have its own length. So you can really quickly get into some interesting territory modulation-wise. As well, here there is a page for adjusting velocity for every note, and then there's a keyboard input if you want to play pitched material. And in the most recent update, we actually also added MIDI in and out. So if you prefer to connect a MIDI controller either through a MIDI interface or through Bluetooth, you can do that and play that way instead of using these, but they're there if you need them. Basic mixer page, you've got panning, reverb, solo, mute, and of course volume for every channel. The reverb is a global reverb send that's adjustable on this master page, where we also have a maximizer and a limiter for mastering, and then also a master EQ, which is the same 3-band EQ. Which also, I don't know if a lot of other apps have this. It's the first time I was introduced to using an EQ in a mobile app, and I feel like it's really fun and responsive to be able to use an EQ with a touchscreen rather than with a mouse. The next page is where you can create different patterns, and it's really easy once you have different patterns that you can select which one you want to work on by long tapping on it, or you can choose different ones to play, quantize to 1 bar. And
do they use the same sample set?
Do
they use the same sample set for each pattern? Or
they do, yeah. They do each use the same sample set, yeah. But yeah, once you have your patterns set up, you can drag them over to the right side and put them in whatever order you want. And this has an unlimited length. And then also you can just drag them over to the trash can if you want to change what you've done. You can insert them in between other patterns that you have.
Oh, neat.
And then the final page, this is kind of the most fun. So you still have this pattern selection and triggering grid on one side, and on the other side you have 4 live effects, and 3 of them, the random, triggering, the pitch, and the reverb, are assignable to different channels. So here I've got random assigned to 1 and 5. Those are, I believe, my rim shot and hi-hat. So if I play and drag that slider up, we get random triggers on those channels. My pitch is connected to that main synth sound. And it's going up and down an octave, but you can adjust that amount here.
That's neat. That performance aspect. So it reminds me a little bit of the Polyphonic tracker, where they've got that page where you can just like fill your boots and assign it to. It's a really powerful concept. That.
Oh yeah, it is kind of like that. And then there's the same reverb send assignable here, and then a global filter that's low pass and high pass, with this being the resonance here. And one interesting thing here is that we have these lock buttons. So normally these sliders snap back to their default position, which is usually how I use them. I find that the best for performance, but if you decide, you want to just leave fills happening, or leave the pitch an octave up on the channels you've assigned that to, that can be doable. And then, you can leave them on or turn them off like that. The final navigation page here is this store, where we've got a few different sample packs. Some are free and some are a few dollars. A couple from me, and then some from other creators that you might recognize.
RKC, yes.
Yeah, I know you've had her on the show before. And then, on the left, it's more kind of functions. You've got undo and redo. This tape is kind of a live recorder. So if you hit that, it records everything that you're doing in the app. And then when you press stop, it gives you the option to spit out either your stems as well as the track you recorded, or just the stereo track, and send that off to anywhere you want
that's
as a zip
neat.
file. Yeah. And and there's also on the arrangement page, you can export if you prefer to just export the song order that you have there. To show you just a few of these kind of more utility things, we've got the Midi menu, which is new in the most recent update, where you can choose any of these highlighted red parameters you can assign. Whichever one you got selected, MIDI learn will work. If I had a MIDI controller connected, I could turn a knob and that would be assigned. So you could have, there are hundreds of parameters available to be assigned here if you want to do that. And then flip actually can also be used for MIDI output. So the channels here, 1 to 9, each send MIDI notes and 20 MIDI CCs.
Wow!
On MIDI channels.
So we're going to see people running the entire gig on the on Flip Sampler, right?
Yeah, it's possible. I've had a lot of fun with connecting it through like a Poly 2 to my modular rig. And yeah, so what else we got here? We've got just your general settings, metronome, there's a tap tempo, and then this question mark box is a kind of handy thing. Oh, it's when you've got that overlay on, you can kind of tap on stuff and get a hint about what it does.
Does it run on M1
mode.
native as it stands? Can you try
it
to
doesn't.
download it?
We're thinking about that, but yeah, at this point, Android is our focus.
Right.
So yeah, not quite yet, but maybe one day.
Yeah, it certainly is an impressive application from what I've seen of it so far, and I suppose the thing is that also, if you're sort of coming back to this kind of notion of diversity, I mean, so now you're also kind of developing application. It's a completely new area, and it kind of brings me to this kind of concept of, as musicians or creative people, you've got to kind of explore every opportunity. And I suppose the thing is, by having the platform that you have already, then you've immediately got a kind of channel to sort of show people what you're up to. Do you find that you're able to compartmentalize well? I mean, because as when you're thinking about certain aspects like that to do with statistics or to do with application design or UI, and then you got to go back and kind of go, right, now I've got to record this jam for 4 producers, 1 sample flip or something of the like. Can you flip that easily, or do you have to kind of decompress in between those kind of moments?
Yeah, I've started to think of that kind of switching as a skill in itself. And I kind of got to that point because, if I'm doing a video where I'm making music on the fly, it's not like a track breakdown, but it's, I'm filming myself as something comes together. And I was finding, because in a lot of my YouTube videos, I like to keep them dynamic. So I'm changing camera angles, I don't just have a one shot up. And I found that I was just constantly switching between like trying to compose this shot and trying to make it beautiful and thinking about the lighting, and then having to go right back into like, okay, well, I just finished my bass line. What do I want to do next? And so I think in doing those videos, I felt myself getting better at that kind of switching gears quickly. And so I do think that kind of has translated into other places where I need to, jump from. Actually, just yesterday I was working on a manual for a product because I'm talking with a couple companies about developing Eurorack modules together. So that was that's another thing to throw into the giant pile of stuff that I'm working on. But I was writing a manual and then going into mixing a song and then answering an email, and it really. Every day I'm switching so quickly between stuff. So I think, it's just gotten to that point that it's constant.
It's interesting. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we have the studio back here. And it's very, we've got 6 cameras so we can flip between them, but I very rarely move them around because if I do that, then I'm not thinking about how I'm presenting. So I try and set it all up to begin with and then go that way. I mean, do you work with multiple cameras? Because, I mean, we work a slightly different, this is getting a bit techie, but I mean, do you record into each camera and then edit on the timeline, or do you bring them all in sort of live outputs and work with that way? Because
at most I'll have 2 cameras.
Right.
Yeah, I have one camera that I move all around, and then I have a top-down setup, and that's pretty much it. Which I prefer because I do love the dynamicness of having that camera, getting a wide shot, and then getting a close-up on my hands playing the keys or all that kind of stuff. I feel like makes for more fun in my videos, and I just find I enjoy the video process. Not as much as the music, but I certainly enjoy it, and it's become another part of my passion. So, I think it's interesting. I never would have thought that I would be more than just a musician. That was always the obsession and the dream as a kid. But then I find, I actually do really like working with this visual side of things, or I do really like figuring out how products can better work for other musicians. So yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? There's a sort of element of problem solving in probably a similarity to what we do. Sometimes you go, right, I want to do this. How do I do that? Okay, well, if I do, and then you're on eBay or Amazon going, oh, I just need that little widget that I can attach it there. Yeah. And if it arrives tomorrow, that means, it's a really interesting dynamic. I think you're right about that continual flipping of skill sets and focus. it is quite hard to maintain. I mean, that's why I'm so fascinated with the space-time thing, because that required an immensely long period of focused, or certainly from the outside, focused attention. So, you must have did you create the space for that to happen in, or were you still trying to do all of that stuff at the same time? I mean, you had help, so I guess that made it a little easier, right?
Yeah, I had a little help from some friends who were just as excited about the project as I was. But yeah, I definitely, I think the story of my life is that I'm always straddling a few too many things. So it would be, I'd have this space set in my studio taking up so much room, and I wouldn't be using it for a couple months or something because just other projects got too busy. I had committed to score a commercial, or I was working on these YouTube videos that because I still wanted to be posting stuff on my YouTube channel while I was filming the space stuff. So yeah, just a constant juggling act.
So when you obviously still review stuff and you feature stuff. I mean, what's the process in that way? Do you kind of like seek it out, or do people seek you out? Because like me, sometimes I'm just going, I really want to look at that thing, and it's a question of getting hold of it. And sometimes it's people are just throwing stuff at you all the time and going, well, I'm not sure if I want to look at this, but I want to look at that. I mean, do you follow your own areas of interest? Is that how you tend to do it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can't think, I don't think there's been a time that there's just something I've reviewed because I felt like, oh, well, it's the new thing and everyone will be talking about it, so I should probably do it. But yeah, I'm generally following the things that are exciting to me. I try to be pretty selective. There is gear that I turn down. And then I guess probably it's a pretty good balance actually of me reaching out to someone saying like, oh, I saw that you're dropping this soon. I would love to take a look. Or, companies reaching out to me. And I guess, at this point I've got so much to play with that it's really, what am I trying to say? It's not so often that, I really need to be the first person to get something. I'm fine to let, something come out, see how other people get on with it. Definitely there was a period of time where I felt like, oh, maybe I should, really try and keep on top of the gear side of the channel. But I think now it's more just, is something going to really inspire me to create music, or is something going to be so interesting that in and of itself it'll make for a really cool video? That's why I did my weird gear series for such a long time. I do want to do it more. It's been like a year since I put out one of those, I think, but those are compelling for me, I think, just because I'm always interested in how an unorthodox piece of equipment is going to shake up my creative process. And then I think for the audience, it's also just like, I've never seen anything like this before.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there is a certain sense of exclusivity. I mean, we obviously have to follow some of the newer ones, but sometimes like you, it's like if everybody's releasing on the same day, sometimes I go, well, I'm not going to do that because there isn't time for me to get to know it properly, and it just won't be a proper review. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. So I'm curious, what's a usual day for you then? I mean, no, we've been talking all this time about the fact that you're just kind of all over the place, but how does your day tend to pan out from a kind of work point of view?
Yeah, it's a little bit different because I do some full days during the week. Where my wife or my parents who are very involved with my daughter who take care of the kid. And then other weekdays are half days for me. So that I'm doing more of the baby care. But yeah, it's I would love to be able to say that it's more structured, but it really depends on what I've got going on, because some videos, I'll edit them for 3 hours and then they're good, and others will take 20. And so, for some days I'm just in front of the computer editing, and other times I'm able to spend a bit more time on music. I wish I had a better answer. It's really all over the place.
Well, I could probably say the same. I usually start by trying to do emails and technicals in the morning, and then the afternoon I would perhaps turn the cameras on and try and work through a review. I'm currently reviewing the boutique JX08, which is interesting.
Cool.
The new Roland boutiques, they seem to have finally, because when they first came out, it was like, well, how can a JP08 only have 4 voices? That doesn't make. Now the JX08 has 20, and it sounds pretty damn good, I have to say. They seem to.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's not bad at all. Are you kind of because you're famously, you got massive modular behind you as well. I mean, how do you find time for that? Because modular time is a thing. You know, we know that it's just a huge black hole. I mean,
it's an absolute wormhole. That's usually nowadays, you know, the thing that I'll get into at the end of the night if I can, because and thankfully there is a good amount of my content, and especially that the second channel content that I'm making that focuses around synths and in particular modular, and so it can feel like both a relaxing exploratory time and something that will do a little bit to help out with my content and my brand or whatever you want to call it. So but it's a weird thing because I feel like it's always changing. And I think when I started with modular, I felt like, I'll create a system that kind of does what I want to do, and hopefully I'll be able to sit with that for a good period of time. And instead what I'm finding is this is sort of like a library. And I do get a lot of modules sent to me, and then there's things that I want to try that I often will buy them used, and there's a lot of trading going on, and it's just something that I really enjoy almost as much as the patching itself. I really enjoy the change in possibilities and the change in how I interact with the system with just a couple different modules in play. So I think as someone who's so interested in the creative process itself and tweaking it and experimenting with it, the modular has this extra pull for me because it's entirely about process. It's every little part of what you do is a decision of signal flow or of the overall kind of the structure of a patch. It's so.
Whenever you get time,
it's all like
whenever
interconnected.
You get time.
Yeah.
So I notice also the matrix brute figures quite a lot in your videos. You tend to reach for it. I'm just curious because I mean there are some synthesizers that are the kind of cornerstone of, and then they're often quite transient. They're not always there. But do you have an instrument that you always go to? I mean, I know you play guitar and bass as well, and ukulele famously. So what is the instrument you tend to reach for, sort of electronically, when you're kind of starting? A piece, if it's not a sound design?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, the tracks start from all different kinds of places for me, and it could be a piece of equipment, it could be in the DAW, it could be the modular, or just an idea for the first line of a song, that kind of thing. So I don't know if there's any one particular thing I reach for. Though I will say, the Matrix Brute comes up a lot, I think just because it's the most powerful monosynth that I've used anyway, and so I think it's easy for me to go there for a lot of the basses and lead sounds that I want to. I really enjoy modulation matrices. I think that's just something about what I love about modular too is just that kind of interconnected routing that you can do. I find really fun. Though I recently bought off a friend a Moog Sub 37, and that's also become one of my
it's
my
really good
for
performing. It's hard to beat that. There's just, I mean, it's angry and aggressive. It's quite hard to tame it, but for performing it that control law and the layout is it's a work of art. I think it's one of their finest hits for a long time.
It's a classic, and it really cuts through. But other than that, I mean, I've yet to settle on a polysynth. After all these years, I still do a lot of my polyphonic stuff as with plugins. I've had a few different synths coming in and out of the studio. Right now, I think the only two polysynths I have are Digitone keys and a Polybrute.
Polybrute's
a lot of the time I'm using. It's
nice.
It's gorgeous.
It's a nice thing.
But a lot of the times I'm using phase planter serum and just playing around on a MIDI controller.
I guess it's what you know as well.
Yeah, as far as how I've come to my way of putting together tracks, being able to compose with MIDI for all the things that are kind of finicky about it, it is still really nice to be able to edit your performance, to be able to tweak the sound after the fact, and
that's true. Yeah,
in some ways it does get you to the finish line faster, while in other ways it can be a
Well,
it's
a common thread, particularly if you're doing work for media composition, which is notoriously deadliney, and it's like, when they kind of phone me back at half an hour before it's about to go live and say, actually, can you change the sound of the bass? It's like software every time. Really, it's so much easier to deal with a recall and all of those things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Although I've been finding the kinds of notes that I get on projects are so little to do with those kinds of music things anymore. I get very general feedback at the start of a project, more just tone and color and like those kind of ineffable words that ad people have to use because they don't know any music terminology. But it's been a long time since I've had someone say like, oh, this chord feels too sad, or like this one note goes for too, or anything like that. They tend not to get into anything close to that level of detail.
Well, nobody has time anymore, isn't it? I mean, that's part of the problem. Everything's kind of bang, 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 which is, great. I mean, in many ways, if you could work at that pace, and I always say, because sometimes you don't always please yourself, but if you please the client, then you might come back to it later and think, actually, that wasn't bad, So it's sometimes, when you feel you're not giving your best, when it's still good enough, then that's when you get that kind of creative confidence that allows you to take on maybe gigs that you'd run a mile from normally because it's too scary, right?
Yeah, well, and it's interesting what happens with your perception of your work, because I find this over and over, and I think it's what's helped me to be so prolific. There's definitely a number of things I've released where I was maybe 85% happy with it, where I'd prefer to be 95% happy with it, and no one ever gets to 100, I don't think, but the response that you get from different people in your audience is so wildly different and so mismatched often with how you feel about your work that something you just threw out really quickly becomes a favorite, whereas something that you labored over for a couple of years you kind of put out to a really middling response, and you end up, for me anyway, I kind of have to detach myself a bit from how invested I am in a certain piece, or how much I feel I really put my best into it, or it represents me artistically the best, or anything like that. And I'm more just, well, I like this enough. Hopefully some other people do. And it's interesting to see which ones pop and which don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole, we could talk for hours about the psychology of creativity and the kind of the risk reward and the amount of energy that goes in compared to how people perceive it. Because like you say, sometimes you just put something out that was just like, oh, that was fun at 5 minutes. And then people go, that was fantastic. But maybe it's to do with the energy that goes in it, the freedom you give yourself by not constraining yourself with sort of stuff. There's all sorts of... So, Andrew, what's next for you? I mean, obviously, we've got the latest version of Flip out. There's the Space Time project. There's your monthly courses, which I think I've got here, which is also a big thing. You run? Are they real time, or do you run those kind of, in semesters, as it were?
Yeah, no, it's pre-recorded videos, lessons, about 14 hours of video lessons that walk through my entire process, basically, including a little bit of getting you going on music theory and DAWs if you're absolutely new to it. But it's, from starting an idea all the way through to mixing and mastering the track that comes out of it. And the real-time aspect of it is that we ask students to commit to a 30-day period where they will be doing projects at a pace that we're assigning them, and that by the end of the 30 days they will have created 3 tracks, and also during that time they'll have feedback from their peers and they'll be giving feedback to their peers, so they can engage with that as much as they want, but of course the more that they can put into it, I think the more that they get out of it. But yeah, the lessons themselves are all pre-recorded, so you can do them from any time zone.
Do you find that you have an affinity with education? I mean, because obviously the ability to be able to communicate on camera and edit and all of those things are really important. I mean, but sometimes, because I've looked at a couple of things where I've been talking about educating, and I just thought MIDI basics and stuff. It's like I find this a bit boring. I don't know if I want to go down to that level. Whereas from what I've seen of what you do, you seem to still have the enthusiasm for that and be able to kind of make it interesting and for yourself as much as the end user.
Yeah, I think if it's the kind of thing that I feel I can convey in a interesting and hopefully concise but still thorough way, that I get satisfaction out of. But there are certainly topics, like I've been thinking about doing a video about advanced chords, and that is something where I'm just not sure that I can do it justice, and so it's one that I'm not sure I'm going to do, because it's not something that I feel I can do in the way that I would like to, which is a bit more entertaining while still conveying the information properly.
It's difficult. It's objective, and there's also Jacob Collier's out there, isn't there? So you can't.
Oh yeah, can't compete with that harmony wise. But yeah, no, I think it's funny because I never really went into anything thinking I would be an educator. And where I started sharing about my process and vlogging a bit more rather than making music videos on my channel, it came from a place of being interested in the less obvious parts of my creations and wanting to share about that. So if I spent a long time on this background sound that I thought was really beautiful, but of course when you hear it in the mix, you really just feel it rather than actually notice it. But I want people to know that I worked on it, or that there was a strange story of how that sound came to be. And so I started sharing about that. And then I realized, there's actually a lot of fun to be had there telling these kinds of stories. But there's also an audience that somehow becomes more interested in your music after learning these things about it, rather than just hearing the finished piece. Or in some cases, there's plenty of people who follow me just for the little production tricks that they'll pick up from me, and don't actually care for the music I'm composing at all, which is fine. And so that was sort of my, the way I stumbled into being more of an educator, was realizing that I enjoyed talking about these things, and also knowing that there's so many people out there who also want to find these little nuggets of knowledge.
So are you going to be, now where the world is opening up a little bit, I mean, we last saw you in Berlin, and there's a show in May, and, there are things happening again. Are you of the mind of like, I can't wait to get back out there, or are you thinking, actually, I could survive in my little cocoon and my bubble. I don't need to travel anymore. I mean, what with it, we're talking remotely at the moment. I suppose it's not the same thing, though. What are you thinking about public appearances and being out there in the world?
Yeah, I miss it a bit, but I think I'm still okay with just staying at home with the baby, and for the amount of additional logistics and worries that all adds to the picture, I'm probably going to stay put for another year or something like that. But I do miss it. It's one of the most fun parts of the job we have, I think, is that we get to all meet up in these interesting places and nerd out together. I mean, some of my best friends I've made through this scene, rather than anywhere else in life. So, yeah. Yeah,
it's funny, isn't it? That kind of affinity. Well, I do hope so. I hope we do get to see each other in person again at some point. I'm looking forward to it. We went to Berlin in September. They're planning on May. I don't know whether it's going to happen. We'll see how it goes, but we're exploring all this sort of virtual and remote production, all that stuff. But Andrew, I wish you all the best with our future products. What have you got? Anything else you want to plug apart from Flip Sample? Is there something, a video that's coming out that you really think everybody should see? What else is going on?
Well, the videos are just coming out as usual. I don't think there's anything super special. Definitely not after Space Time. But Flip is the big thing right now. And then, down the line, I guess this is probably several months from now, look out for a few Andrew Huang influenced Eurorack modules, partnering with a couple different companies. But that's for quite a bit in the future.
Excellent.
But hopefully we do see each other in person soon. That'd be great.
Oh, Andrew, thank you very much for talking to us. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we do hope to see you again soon. Take care.
Yeah, thanks for having me.